Hello, everybody. It's Monday Night Therapy. I'm John Johnston, your host, your only host. Why am I wearing headphones? Because I am not talking to anybody. What the hell? Maybe it's habit. It's July. What is it? July 8th. And, it's kind of like June. It's not as bad as June, where it's just void of college football pretty much, except for bad things happening. And July, at least in July, we're getting ready for media days. I think the Big 12 has their media days actually coming up tomorrow. Uh, and I just got back from a week in Canada and fishing. And you know what happens when you take a vacation? You have to look at people's vacation photos. Unless I get one person on the chat to say, no, don't show us your damned vacation photos. I'm going to go ahead and show you some vacation photos. You have 10 seconds. Too late. Okay. If I can find them. Because one of the things about being on vacation is I forgot how everything works. Okay. All right. So we went fishing in Canada, right? We went up to this lake. It was, in Ontario. It wasn't that way up in Canada, like Manitoba or something like that. This lake was billed to us as having a lot of muskies. Nobody in my party caught a muskie the entire week, but I've caught muskie before. They're fairly hard to catch. They're fairly hard to fish for. The lake was billed as you just catch them, and we didn't just catch them. So everybody was disappointed in that. We caught, let's see here. This is what you refer to as a snake pike. That's all I caught all week. On my third cast, I caught a bigger pike than that, but we didn't get a photo with it. That is what we refer to as a snake because they're long and thin and they look like snakes, and you just like try to whack them. I was going to say whack them off before they get in the boat, but that's bad phrasing in it. Fred will pick up on that. But there you go. Me with a snake. There's me yelling at a walleye. It was a decent walleye. I think that one might have been 21. Here's me with a smallmouth. You guys love this, right? I caught so many smallmouth bass. Before I went, I hadn't caught smallmouth bass for a very long time. I caught so many smallmouth bass by the third day, literally. I was referring to them as rats, and I was really tired of them. This is the photo of the largest walleye I've ever caught in my life. It was 24 inches. I lifted it up. We measured it. We didn't weigh it, but we measured it. It had to go back in the water because it was too big. They wanted to keep those. And as I rose to pick it up, it escaped into freedom. And that photo, somebody, my own kids, when they saw this photo, said, "You didn't complete the catch." And I did. It was in my hands. I have witnesses, but there it is, the most wonderful 24-inch walleye that I've ever caught. I'm not a very good walleye fisherman. So for me to catch walleye at all, and I caught, I don't know, 5, 6 of them at least. Maybe one day we were fishing for walleye. It was a good time for that. Again, it was disappointing with the muskies. I really wanted to come back and show you all a picture of the 45 or 50-inch muskie, but I didn't even catch a 30-inch muskie. And I busted my favorite rod, it was really disappointing. Although my nephew managed to either throw or lose a $500 rod to a fish that hit it, he said. And I think that was fairly suspect because no fish were hitting that were that big. Okay. Fred Sacco says, hopefully you're fully clothed in them at least. Well, listen, it rained a lot. I don't know what you guys' lives have been like, but it's been raining like hell in Minnesota, and it rained like hell in Canada. There was no not being clothed. And because the other thing is this, if you're out there and you don't have like parts of your body covered, you're going to be eaten. And I don't want those pieces of my body eaten by mosquitoes. They were just thick everywhere you went. Charles Hullett says, Skeeter on my Peter, whack it off just like the sidetrack band. That's recalling something from a while back. Okay. Here's what I'm trying to do. It is time. It's early July, but it's still, we got a football season coming up. We're going to have Big Ten media days coming up this month. And we have Charles Huddlett says, so you're saying you didn't skin the fish and wear them like clothing? I don't, that's kind of weird. I didn't see anything you could skin. We did have a black bear run across in front of us on the road. Didn't see any moose, though. That was disappointing. Although, the place we went, it had a drive-in. It was a resort, and then it was a pretty big lake, a glacial lake like, you have in Canada or in the north. And then it was surrounded by dense forest that if you walked into, you're never coming back out alive again. Where was I going? Oh, yeah. Media Days is coming up this month. And we're going to find out, we're going to have, I think Andy Ketterson is going to be going to Media Days for us at Coronation again this year. So we will have someone there to represent us. There you go. Let's see. Banners. I got to figure this out. Like I said, I forgot everything. Okay. Offensive line. That's what I want to talk about. I know everybody's like, we have only 3. I know when we talk about Nebraska football in the for 2024, when you look at this team in 2024, you're looking at a defense that still should be pretty good. We're going to the second year of a 3-3-5 defense. We played a ton of people last year. We played very good defense in the first year under a new system. It was pretty impressive with Tony White, what he did. Defensive line was outstanding, good defense all around. You can expect, I expect the same this year. I know that we lost the defensive secondary coach while I was gone, and we bought a new one. And that number one, how quickly that happened and the way it happened should be a sign that, number one, it was in the works. It was in work. At least it was in the works from the head coach perspective. And number two, that Matt Rule has enough enough prestige, enough contacts, enough people he knows in the business to just go out and get a better defensive secondary coach than possibly the one he had. How well the guy's going to fit into his fit into his staff, I guess that's always a guess. And it's kind of bad timing to do it right before the season starts. But if you have something going on in your staff, and all I've heard is rumors, and I'm not going to go into that stuff, for the way for it to happen this close to the season probably was not good, and the person needed to be let go. So that happened. But despite all that, I wouldn't worry about the defense too much. The offense is a whole nother story, and I think we all know that. That's no secret. When you talk about the offense, everybody begins with quarterbacks, and for good reason. I mean, last year it was pretty obvious that we struggled at quarterback with turnovers and being able to complete passes and things like that. I want to talk about the offensive line because for me, that's where everything begins and ends pretty much. If you don't have an offensive line, well, I think we've seen what's happened when we don't have an offensive line. Because the offensive lines under our previous coaching regime were absolute disasters. They weren't coached at all, or they looked like they weren't coached to me. You could tell, and any opposing defensive coach had to know this. When under Scott Frost, when anybody ran a stunt or a twist against our offensive line, all their brains exploded and they fell to pieces. And the pass rushing, we gave up sacks, and I'll show you some of this in a minute. But they weren't being coached at all. Now, last year, let me see if I can actually do this. I actually, you know what I did? I did something amazing. I prepared for this show. Because I'm realizing, it is July 8th, and either I'm going to go into the season by myself doing this or find a sidekick somewhere, or at least get a producer, somebody that can help me with graphics and layouts and be able to keep track of comments while I'm actually blabbering on about stuff. Um, all right, let's take a look at something real quick. This is, let's see how I do this. Oh, look, I'll put myself up here. Nebraska's offense in 2022. Yeah, there's a whole football. It's not like baseball where they generate just so many freaking massive amounts of statistics. They have statistics for stubbing toes, but football still generates a huge number of statistics. And you have all these people now that have advanced stats with success rates and success plays and all that kind of stuff. Well, number one, because of my brain injury, I don't understand stats, even though I have a math minor. I like using the old traditional stats. And one of the things you can look at is, how good is your rushing offense? Well, it's pretty easy to look at. Where did you rank nationally in rushing offense? And in 2022, Nebraska was 100th nationally, which is not good. Just in case you were like, oh, is that good? No, it's not good. You want to be like number one or two. That'd be ideal. Where we used to be when we were, rushing the ball and we ran the ball and we crushed people with the running game. We weren't close to that. Nowhere close to it. So 2022, we were 100th in the nation in rushing offense. 2023, that rose to 39th rushing offense. At 100, you see the difference in the 2 years that how many yards per game changed there. So the thing with that is this. Nebraska, where our scoring offense was absolutely terrible last year. I think it was, what was it? One of the last, I have that written down. I should have put it in a little graphic. I was trying to figure out how to make graphics that look actually decent. And, I still haven't figured out the layout. So we're trying to prepare for football season. That's what I'm trying to do. Nebraska's offense last year moved the ball okay at times. Their problem was turnovers. And their other problem was, well, let me bring up another graphic. Let's see, brand. Their other problem was they were one-dimensional. They couldn't complete a pass, right? They couldn't throw to anybody. Number two, they lost receivers. They also lost running backs, to injuries. But 2022, we were 55th nationally in third down conversion at 40%. And in 2023, that actually dropped quite a bit. I mean, you'll notice that the third down conversion rate didn't drop a huge amount. But you also see where it slight percentages increases make a huge difference in your ranking, and then make a huge difference on the field. Just in case you're wondering, the number one offense in the nation last year in third down conversions was Georgia, and they converted 55% of their third downs. So when you look at where you want to be, well, number one, you don't want to be 76th nationally. You don't want to be 55th nationally. You want to be up, obviously, toward the top, but you want to be above 50. And the thing about that is this: third down conversions are obviously important for one huge reason, and that is to keep the sticks moving, to keep your offense going, to keep your offense on the field. If you have, which Nebraska could this year, have an explosive offense with explosive playmakers like, Dylan Riola to Jalen Lloyd, who can catch, 39.5 yards per reception last year, then maybe your third down conversion rate isn't that important. But, well, that's not true. You can still have an explosive offense, and you still want your third down. This is one of the more important statistics to me when I'm looking at how good a football team is how good Minnesota, for example. I don't know what theirs is. I didn't write it down, but Minnesota does a really good job on 30 down conversions, and they win a lot of games. Why? Because their offense stays on the field and they just keep the ball. And it's a pretty effective method of doing things. But you'll notice that we did drop. And then we have one more thing. We're talking about the offensive line. Sacks allowed. 2022, 90th in sacks allowed with 2.75 sacks per game. 2023, we went up just slightly with 2.5 sacks per game. And you guys can comment on, what was the difference there? What happened? I think that last year when you looked at the offensive line, like I said, you saw an offensive line that moved together well in their pass protection, or at least, okay, maybe not is well the right word. They did things okay. They did all right compared to the year before, like I said, where they just blew up. They literally had a stunt or twist happen, and they would just their wall blocking would go to shit. They couldn't slide block for shit. They couldn't pass protect for shit. They'd pick the wrong guys off, and a guy had come inside and slaughter our quarterbacks. They did a little bit better last year. At least they looked like they were getting their shit together. Okay. And that's key. One thing I want to point out. One huge difference from this year to last that I think is telling, and that is this. Last year at this time, we were all looking at this and going, we have a new coaching staff coming in. And, why did they keep that one guy? Because they kept one guy from Scott Frost's staff, and everybody was like, the only reason they kept that Riola guy was so the other kid would commit as quarterback, and they shouldn't have kept him, and the offensive line sucks. And we're going to be terrible at the offensive line. And we're not doing that this year. Donovan Riola nobody talks about him. They don't say he sucks. They don't say he should be gone. They don't say he should have never been retained. Nobody's really talking about Donovan. I hope I'm getting his name right. Donovan Riola, the offensive line coach at Nebraska. Nobody's making comments about the fact that he should be gone. And I think that's telling in terms of just saying that with the coaching, it looks like it's going to be fine. What did I say before the season? Did I say that? I think before the season, I do have to get a sidekick. I can't talk this much, the breath part, or I got to work on my breath. David Matney says, hey, looks like he was worth keeping. I stand corrected. He also says, David Matney also says, we did not have a chance to be sacked because we were too busy throwing interceptions. That's sad, but probably true. Fred Sacco says Minnie talks about him. She talks about all the Riolas, especially the ones whose names start with D. That they did this on purpose. It's kind of interesting. If you go out to Nebraska's, I'm getting ahead of myself. If you go out to Nebraska's website and check the roster, you'll find that if you go through the roster, there's these little ear icons, and you can listen to the pronunciation of player names. And it's obviously their own voices saying their own names. And this is a problem. And the reason for the problem is this. If I can find my other graphic I did. Here is actually, you know what I did? I took this from Minnie's articles. We did a position preview before the spring game coordination, and Minnie wrote the offensive line article. And this is what she projected as offensive line starters. And there's one big problem here, and that is nobody knows how to pronounce Micah Mazuka. They don't have that pronunciation out there on the roster on the website. We'll come back to this in a minute. You can go and listen to Teddy Prohaska pronounce his name. Jason, I just listened to it. Chuck pronounce his name, but you can't listen to Mazuka guy, the guy that transferred in. That's probably going to be projected as our starting offensive guard. You can't hear him pronounce his name, and that this is why I come up with nicknames typically. All right, back to the offensive line. Let's go back over there. Okay. Whoop. Aaron Keene says Micah Bazooka. Highlander Glenn, oh, I missed it. Highlander Gun says, who is the long sapper? I don't know. He's not in this discussion. That would be a special teams discussion. Well, hey, there's Linda Wilkins. I haven't seen you in a while. How the hell are you? I'm pretty good. You know what? I will say this. I am kind of worn out because, well, it was, you know what? I thought that I would struggle on this fishing trip. And I really didn't that much. The biggest struggle was being the only sober person on the trip. And I'm not saying that from the standpoint of, oh, I wanted to drink. I'm saying that from the standpoint of, holy shit, drunk people are really obnoxious when you're sober. When you're the only sober person in a room full of 10 people, it's it's time to leave or something. Anyway, where the hell was I? Let's see, back to Brand. Okay, let's go through these offensive linemen. The number one person for me on this list is Bryce Benhart, and I'm going to say this again. I hope that Bryce Benhart went from, if you remember, like in 2022 when they were grading tackles, we went from having two of the worst tackles in the entire nation to Bryce Benhart earning all Big Ten honors, honorable mention. And Bryce Benhart is back again this year. And I think number one, that's some wonderful news. And number two, that he could hopefully, I hope so. I swore the guy so much and blamed him for so many problems. You know, my car breaks down, that fucking Bryce Benhart did it. But I hope that he works himself into a nice NFL draft pick because I think he deserves it. You know, after all the crap some of these guys have been through with their coaching staff, I hope the best for him. Benhart has 41 starts, and that I believe is tying a record for the most starts as an offensive lineman at Nebraska, and that is before the season starts. So if he goes into the season, he will set the record for the most offensive line starts. He started all 12 games last year. Turner Corcoran started 7 before he was injured. Let's see who else we got on the starters. Our offensive starters, we're returning 10 offensive starters. Ben Scott started 11 games last year, and I think it was, I want to say it was Justin Evan Jenkins who played center on the game that he was injured. Turner Corcoran, I mentioned him. And Teddy Prohaska started 6 games last year. But I think the key is this. When you look at this set, you know, you got Micah Maskua there. Makua. Oh, my God. There's something else we got. This is one of the reasons why I'm doing this show. I wasn't going to do it tonight because I'm still burned out from my trip. But I thought, you know what? It's time to get ready for the season. And Bazooka has he's transferred in from Florida, I believe, and he was at Baylor before that, and he has 1 year remaining. And I think last year, no, when he was at Baylor, he was graded out as the best guard in the Big 12. Get this man a thesaurus stat. It wouldn't help. You know, I have to do this on the fly. Charles Hullett hits on a key point here. Let me get this graphic off here. If these are projected first team, who are their backups and how do we feel about them? Okay, let's see. 2 deep, we got Henry Latosky, Raquan Buckley, Gunnar Gotchula, Sam Sledge, and Tyler Canuck. I think that the key to this is, and I think we all know this, and I don't think I'm saying anything revolutionary about the offensive line, is there's probably no place more important on the offense than to get old and stay old than there is on the offensive line. I know that there's teams like Alabama or some, the great teams that have been there. Um, they'll pick up a freshman, he'll become a starter because he's projected so high and stuff like that. I don't look for that. I never look for that. If you have a freshman, because we did pick up some good freshmen, Gibson Pyle, Grant Bricks, Xander Ruggeroli. Hey, I think I got that right. You know, if those guys are starting as freshmen and they come in and start as freshmen, that means that your other guys that have been there for a while suck. That's my take on it. That you couldn't find, or you didn't develop, or you didn't have the strength conditioning necessary to have people that have been in your program for 2 or 3 years to be better than a freshman that comes in. And I realize there's phenoms sometimes, but as a general overall rule, you never want to see a freshman starting on the offensive line because it means your depth is shit. All right. If these are projected first team, who are the backups and how do we feel about them? I think for the first time, you're looking at an offensive line that has, some depth. I think what was there? 26. We have 26 offensive linemen, which is a good pile of flesh. They're big, giant tank dirigible people. They beat the shit out of each other. When you think about offensive football, I think about these guys. What is it? I think Brent Benhart is like 325 pounds, or they're just, beating up another 320-pound guy. Let me ask this question in the chat. I remember being at Nebraska, and we would throw parties at 1219 New Hampshire, and every once in a while, football players would show up. And when you're around them, you look at them and you realize that they're kind of almost not human beings with their size and they're just massive structure. And I just like to ask the chat, have any of you guys ever been right next to offensive linemen, standing, their sweats pouring on you? That sounds creepy. But you know what I mean? Have you ever been next to those huge human beings? Right next to them? Because, oh my God. Oh, Clay Casselder, 826 Charleston. That sounds like a very familiar address. I think I almost got beat up there one time. Treggy says, yes, they're monsters. I mean, there's a giant human beings. Justin Rogge says, not recently. Well, they probably got bigger where you were thinking about it. Clay says North Bottoms. I'm familiar with where that is, that 826 Charleston address. Fred Sacco, of course, comes in and says, I haven't been Camp Kenosha by him, but I've been around large lineman types. And Charles Hullett, walking back from class to Harper Schramm Smith, I'd follow some of those guys, and they were massive humans. Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure where I was going with that. Anyway, I think where the key is this. I think that our starting five looks pretty good. Yeah, but again, you're going to need more than five guys. It would be best if you had replacements for every position across the board and you didn't have any drop off when you put your second set alignment in. And, I'm not going to say there's not going to be any drop off from our top five with the second group, but I think also with the players that we're bringing in on the offensive line, that the future looks good in terms of being able to actually develop players, have a strength and conditioning program that can put them in positions to succeed, and also to build. You remember that I didn't want to do this. I should. When was the last time we won an Outland Trophy or a Remington Trophy? I mean, my God, it's been years. I don't want to live in the past. But if we want to be a team that competes for championships, that's what we're going to have to get to. And I think that we're putting ourselves in a position that, we can get back to that level of football. And it's also, Man, what I was going to say just went right on my head. I looked at the comments. Jeff Bedouin, speaking of butchering names, Jeff Bodewin says, as an artist, I'm offended by AI art, but that cover is pretty cool. It's getting much better generating silly graphics with Chat GPT. I noticed that when I was gone to Canada, that AI didn't take over the world. And in fact, it seems to be the realization, which is similar to what I have, that AI is about 80% hype. And, Linda Wilkins says, John, go easy on the Kool-Aid. Hey, I'm trying to prepare for the season here. I didn't have a guest lined up for tonight, but I decided I'd do the show anyway. And I don't, no, I'm not going to go easy on the Kool-Aid. Maybe later on I'll be cynical, but it's July 8th and I can be all gung ho about the season. I don't know if you guys listen, Andy Staples. I hope you guys know who Andy Staples is. I personally think he's the best college football national writer out there. And he now is with On3, used to be with The Athletic. He did an article, I think, 2-3 days ago in which he predicted Nebraska would be 7-0 going into by the time we hit Ohio State. And I thought that was very interesting coming from Andy Staples, because Andy Staples has his finger on the pulse of the nation when it comes to college football. And there you go. I just brought that up. So that's in response to your Kool-Aid drinking thing, Linda. Breathe it, cleansing breath there. Minnie says, drink all the Kool-Aid you want. I like it. Thank God we have you. The positivity. David Matney says, let's get Corn Nation to 10K subs. Hit the subscribe button. Please do. If you're on Twitter, come over to YouTube and subscribe to our channel, please. Linda Wilkins says, thoughts on the baseball, softball field renting the UN just entered into? No thoughts whatsoever. I'm out of touch. I have no idea. I'm preparing for football. There will be, there is one thing that happens before football season, and that is the Olympics coming up. And we do have Olympics. Nebraska has some people going into the Olympics, both in basketball and volleyball. And I believe we have a track and field person. And I'm going to be doing an article on that. I think that, God dang it, I looked at the comments again. My brain explodes. Players in the Olympics and stuff like that. And the Olympics will be fun for us to see what can happen with the Nebraska people. Fred Sacco says, John, getting angrier with Linda Wilkins than me. What is this world coming to? You're slacking, Fred. That's what the deal is. Clay Castler says, John, was there smoke at the water at the fishing trip? They said don't bring THC into Canada, so I left my gummies at home. I didn't need them anyway. And I usually use them to control my headaches from my brain and not get stoned, because I hate being stoned. I tried that once with gummies, and it was just freaking terrible. I have no idea how people live with that shit. There's voices in your head start coming out again and start saying all sorts of, things. We'll stop there. I'm going to avoid the election comments just because, my God, help us all. Corby Kobus says, hopefully Matt Rule catches as many wins as John caught fish. That would be actually a fair number that would be winning them all. And that would be really nice. I don't think we're going to do that. But I do think that we are going to have a good season. I hope I don't jinx it. What else do I have left to say about the offensive line? Okay, I made the point about the fact that we're not complaining about the offensive line coach. Went through some of the players. One thing I could have prepared better is how many starts overall everybody had and how many starts we have compared to the rest of the Big Ten. Now, We are returning 10 starters on the offense. I mentioned that earlier, and that is huge because that means they've all played together in a group. There is always this thing about offensive linemen that the more experience they have together in a group, the better they are. And I remember years ago, I read a study that is not necessarily true, but I can't believe it's not true. I mean, I wasn't a very good football player in high school, but I did play guard, and you do have to kind of learn what the guys next to you are going to do and what they're going to, what their tendencies are, or how you even talk to them when you walk up to the line. Clay Cassalder says, "What style of offense will we run?" That's a good question. I would hope that we run a very balanced offense. I know that we're Nebraska, and in the past we've stated, we've done this stuff. I mean, I have shirts that say "run the fucking ball," and there's a reason for that. It's in our history. As a romantic, I'm going to expose myself a little bit. This is going to sound a little weird to you people. As a romantic, when I read books as a younger person, well, even if I read books now, okay, I'm going to go kind of off the rails here a little bit, but why not? It's July 8th and it's Monday night. Listen, when I read like King Arthur's tale, if you remember this tales of King Arthur, the sword Excalibur was tied to the king and it was tied to the land, and they all worked together. And when the king lost his sword and he lost his faith in himself, the land suffered, and all of that stuff went to hell. Everything fell apart with Sir Lancelot and the queen and the affair and all that kind of stuff that happened in King Arthur's tales. There's a part of me that always believed that because of Nebraska's history, and if you know Nebraska's history, you know that the land in Nebraska was so hard to farm, it was so hard to settle that they gave it away as part of the Homestead Act. Not last year, but many years ago. I was like 5 then, but I always kind of had this belief that because the land was so tough and because it made Nebraskans so tough, because only the tough lived there and only the tough could settle there, that running the ball is actually part of that. It has that same relationship as Excalibur and King Arthur did with his kingdom. And I realize that probably sounds fruity, but hear me out, because I'm going to give you the rest of this. I mean, that was a long drive up to Canada and back. My grandnephew, great nephew, whatever you call him, my nephew's son, I went with him. He did most of the driving, thank God. But I thought about this on the way back, because when I was up there, I talked to the Canadian resort owner, and he was actually lived in Wisconsin. And I talked to him about the difference between Minnesota and Wisconsin, because I've been in Minnesota for a long time. And I've told this story a few times. But the difference between Minnesota and Wisconsin is this. Wisconsin is full of probably the happiest people in our nation. And the reason for that is every bar is a restaurant and every restaurant is a bar. The second reason for that is this. Years ago, when they were founding towns in Wisconsin, some guy would stand up and he'd go, "We should have a rule about blah, da, 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 da." And somebody else would go, "Hey, shit ass, if you want to make a rule, go across the river." And that's why Wisconsin is full of happy people, where every bar is a restaurant and every restaurant's a bar. And Minnesota is full of people that have loved so many rules. So many rules. And when I look at Iowa and Nebraska, okay, and I think about the types of people that settled in either of those states, the Iowa has some of the best dirt in the nation for farming. You basically don't have to irrigate. You plant and then you go fart off and then you harvest. Nebraska, you got to irrigate, you got to do all sorts of shit, and then you can harvest. But the key is this: the people who were coming across and they decided to settle in Iowa, you know who they were? They got to that point and they said, "You know what? This is good enough. This is good. We'll just stay here. We'll settle here. This is good enough. We're not going on to California to partake in the gold strike. And we're not going on to the West Coast to glory and try to find our riches. Iowa, this land is good enough for us. And that reflects today in their football program. Because, the other thing I thought about, we had some discussions sitting on a boat for hours. You have a lot of discussions. We discussed Iowa football. And one of the things when you look at Iowa football compared to Nebraska football is this. When you look at how good Iowa's defense has been since Phil Parker has been there, he's one of the best defensive coordinators in the nation, easily. If Kirk Ferentz even bothered to try on offense, to build an offense that could score, 25 points a game, they would be winning national titles. But they're not going to do that. Why? Because it's good enough. And that's the difference between Nebraska and them. Okay? We've gone through some tough times over the last 20 years, specifically over the last 6 or 7. But you know what? It wasn't because we just sat there and decided to settle. We get a lot of shit from people about firing 2 coaches at 9-3. Well, that's because it wasn't good enough, and it shouldn't be good enough. And we should continue to strive for national championships and conference championships, and not ever say to ourselves, "This is just good enough." And I think that that's probably the biggest key to, coming into the second season under Matt Rule. I'm wearing myself out here. That's probably the biggest key about why you should be excited about going into the second season with Matt Rule, is because, because I think that when you look at us, I think we're in a good position. I think we have a lot of players. We may not have all the experience we need, and we may not have all the depth we need. But I think that the fact that, again, when I started this, when talking about the defensive secondary coach, Evan Cooper, who left and was replaced by another guy like Bing Badoom Bading, and that guy, wants to be a defensive coordinator and might fill in the position if Tony White leaves. That shows you that the coach we have is a leader and that he has a lot of contacts and that he can reach out and touch people. He can reach out and bring people into the organization that want to be there. That's a pretty big thing. Okay, Stephanie Jackson says Iowa has bad corn. They do. Thanks for being here, Stephanie. Wait a minute. Stephanie earlier said, I bought tickets to the Nebraska versus USC game. It's going to be my first Husker game. I'm so excited. Do you think we're going to beat USC? I don't see why not, honestly. Obviously, that's in November. Oh, Minnie says, hey, Stephanie, I'm going also. Oh, my God. We just both get together. And I think that game's at USC, if I remember right. Yeah, it's in November at USC. We will know a lot more about our football team, obviously, in November. We'll know a lot more about, how many injuries we have, if it's anything like last year. It will be fun. Do I think we can beat USC? I don't think there's anything terrifying in USC that there's not a reason right now why you would look at that game and say, no, we're just going to lose. I think it's right now it's kind of a toss up. What was I going to say about you? We've never beat USC. Did you guys know that? We have only played them 4 times in our history, and we have lost all 4 games. And Linda Wilkins says we will know a lot more after UTEP. I think that's true. I've said this. I'll continue to say it. It's obvious. It's nice to start out with quite frankly, a body bag game at home instead of starting out on the road with a conference game that sets a really crappy tone to the season if you lose it. All right. Let me go back through some of these comments. David Matney says, as much as I think Trev is a traitor, he made the right hire with Rule. That's true. Tiger Shark Diver says, I can't lose to a man, much less a coach named Lincoln Riley. They eat steak well done. That's gross. I've only had like 2 steaks in the last maybe 2 years, but I don't have any. Why you would get a steak well done is No, I if I'm gonna eat steak, I want to be able to stab it and hear it go moo before I eat it. That's just slap it on there, here it goes, take it off, and that's good enough for me. Uh, Sam Eisenman, he actually puts his phonetic pronunciation there. That's a good idea. Says, I'll have more faith in our football team when we beat Colorado. It's July 8th. I had thoughts on Colorado too. Honestly, when I look at that game right now, before the season starts, uh, I don't see any way we're losing to Colorado. I see us just beating the living shit out of Colorado, like 82-3. Number one, this is going to be a revenge game, and number two, I don't have any faith in the Coach Sanders is has is putting a team together. Everything that you see about the way he talks, the way he handles himself, the way he handles his recruiting, all of that kind of stuff is just it just looks like fake. You know what it looks like? It looks like old Tucson where you went down there and they build a storefront for the movies and there was nothing behind it. That's pretty much what Colorado reminds me of. Fred Sacco says, "Got to beat Colorado. We lose to them. Ooh boy, woo! I will be hell to deal with." Yeah, I can imagine if we lose this game that it will be a nightmare across the entire Husker fan base. We will have to burn shit. I seriously, we'll have to. I don't know what we'll do, but I don't know, destroy something. What did you guys do for July 4th? I was in Canada, so I watched people drink, and there was a Canadian dude there at the resort. One of the people that were helping us, change the gas, give us bait, and that kind of shit. When I came out to the dock and set off some fireworks for our July 4th, because on Canada Day, which is July 1st, it was raining like hell and he didn't get the chance. So that was our July 4th celebration. I trust everybody else had good celebrations. But one of the things that it seems to have become a tradition, and I'm sure you've seen the video, is people in Alaska launching cars off a cliff and with music, and it looks, it looks a hell of a lot more fun than fireworks. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but yeah, Colorado. I don't see anything. I don't really see anything there that could stop us from winning that game. Of course, that's why they play them. They do have some good players, but they don't have. It all looks fake to me. All right. Tiger Shark Diver says, "Do you need a passport to get into Canada?" I think you do now. I mean, I got a passport for this trip. My nephew made a big deal about getting across the border. That they check your arrest record. Mine, anyway. I mean, we handed the lady our passport. She looked at them and asked us some questions about if we had anything to declare. Did we have any guns, anything like that, alcohol, or whatever, anything else? And then we went into Canada. It wasn't that big a deal. But I did get a passport for the trip. I think you need one now. High Mountain Guy says the season is essentially over if there's a Colorado loss. The backlash and negative would be a lead weight around the program early. I think that the season being over, exactly. What do you expect? Maybe this is its own show. We're trying to figure out how we can do polling on the show. And I think that maybe that's a good idea that we do polls, because I would, if I could do a poll, I would ask people, what do you expect this season to be? I mean, I think that our ceiling is about 10-2. And the funny thing about saying that is when we say that's the ceiling, that suddenly becomes our expectations as well, because we are Nebraskans and we're all crazy people. But Uh, what do you expect the season to be? I think that it would be a terrible loss, that's for sure, and it would certainly damage the season's hopes. But if you look at this next season, you say, I just hope we get to a bowl game. That's what we all did last year. Um, then certainly a bowl game is still in the works for next season, and that wouldn't destroy that. And that would still be a step forward, which is kind of sad to say, but we're still saying it. Fred Sacco says, I figured John would have declared his disdain for the Hawkeyes before crossing the border. I just was quiet. I know that's hard to believe, but I sat in the passenger seat and I just looked straight ahead and I just was like, I was quiet. I just said nothing till she said, are you related to, my grandnephew? Yes, I am related. Yes, we're related. And then, she wanted to know why he was driving a Minnesota car with Minnesota plates. I talked very little. When I got to Canada, though, I declared a lot of things. Anyway, let's see. Charles Hullett says, I've been asked for a passport every time for the last 10 years. Fred. High Mountain Guy says, Colorado has killed 3 seasons in recent memory. I expect to win. It's the most important game on the schedule. I agree with that. Okay. We're coming up on 52 minutes. I don't know if I have anything else for tonight. Anything else going on in the world of sports? I guess I've watched some soccer, the Copa thing. High Mountain Guy says also fuck Colorado, their coach, their team, and state. So there's that. I agree with that. Soccer. I'm not going into soccer. I thought I'd go into soccer, but I'm not going to into. Anything else from you guys? As we come up on an hour and I run out of energy. David Manny says, thanks, John. Great show. Thank you. I'm still trying to figure out. I think I said this at the beginning. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do for the fall. I could use somebody to help me with producing this in terms of being able to watch chat and pick out chat comments for me. I did cheesy graphics for this one. I'll probably try to do that. Maybe I'll actually start prepping for shows instead of just making shit up as I go. But we're going to see what happens if we go into a new season. I still hope to get some guests on because I know even though Nebraska is terrible, I see that there's still more podcasts being created by people. There's new podcasts coming down for people on, they're creating new ones all over the place. Where was I going with that? I don't know. Sam Eisenman says, will you be here in Lincoln for the Colorado game? That'll be a damned hard ticket to get. And I would like to be there, but we're going to, we'll see what happens as the season gets closer. Clay Casselder says, you are doing awesome, John. Thank you. Let's see what else we got. Aaron Keene says, USMNT. Oof, that describes pretty much my feelings on soccer. Probably a little bit more profanity. Tiger Shark Diver says, recruits are putting us in their top 5 just for social media clout. This reminds me, by the way, I think in the next day or two, Corn Nation will announce we have a new recruiting writer. And that will be good because we have not been doing the greatest job lately at covering recruiting. And that's one hole I wanted to fill before the season started. So that will be taken care of. The other Dave, okay. Blame Canada. I do. Well, at least Mike Riley had success there. Oh, and when will the Colorado ticket prices come? Oof. I can imagine that trying to get a ticket to the Colorado game is going to be. It's like getting a ticket to Hamilton, $850 or something like that. Owen Walker says, "Will Todd come back this fall?" I missed that one. No, he will not. Let's see. Fred Secco says, I'll be your guest, John, and I swear no 18-second delay necessary. Well, maybe we'll check into that. We're talking about the enhanced driver's license doesn't work when flying from my quick search. I think that's the real idea. I have one of those. James Boardman says, was your trip relaxing and enjoyable? I guess compared to work, yes, it was. I mean, literally, listen, you're out in the Canadian wilderness. You're on a boat on a lake. You're surrounded by dense forest and 60 billion trillion mosquitoes. I mean, it was even that the fishing didn't turn out to, so I came back with a 50-inch or a 60-inch muskie monster. It was still, fun. I was glad I went. I had fun. I enjoyed it. It didn't cause me as many physical problems as I thought it would. So there you go. Yeah. Da, ba, da, ba, da, da. Oh. Apparently, the real idea is different from the enhanced driver's license. Only half a dozen states issued the ED. All this shit. Why are they doing this? Tiger Shark Driver says we need to wage war against mosquitoes. It's been so rainy up here that it's been damn difficult to wage war against mosquitoes at all. I mean, they're terrible this year. All right, that's it. I think for tonight. I will try to have some guests on. I'm hoping to get Scott Doctorman at some point. I don't know if that'll be live, where we can talk about Iowa and we can abuse an Iowa guy directly. UCLA, I still haven't talked to a UCLA person. I guess one of the things I was going to bring up about podcasts and everybody having their podcasts is I try to talk to other people. In other words, most of the other Nebraska shows and podcasts tend to focus only on Nebraska. I like to talk to other programs. Maybe I'll get my friend Ramsey on here to talk about Ohio State. And I haven't talked to him for a while. That he's always good. But I enjoy talking to getting other people's perspectives on what's going on with their football programs because, well, we're going to play them or we're going to deal with them, in one sport or another if you're in the Big Ten. All right. I think that's it for tonight. I think Greg created some kind of outro that I'm not going to use yet. All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you for the support. You might go to Cobby Corn. There might be new stuff up there that I haven't announced yet and just get there ahead of time. Take care of yourselves and we'll see what happens going forward with this. And again, thanks for the support. Good night.